Okay. I have these conversations that go on the inside. Okay. Jennifer, can you explain internal family systems just like in a little nutshell for the people that don't know what that is?
In a nutshell, internal family
Yeah.
systems is one way of conceptualizing our internal world and how we relate to ourselves. So it doesn't have like the ultimate, like it hasn't invented it. It has only discovered a way to talk about it. So it's just how does your internal critic talk to you? How does your internal like jokester talk to you? Like all of us have, most of us have an audible like internal dialogue that's thinking out loud. And sometimes that shifts personalities depending on where we are. And so it just slows that dialogue down and starts to focus your curiosity towards it so that you can reflect on the different parts of you and how they're operating inside of you. Because most people are kind of on autopilot with those voices and their internal dialogue.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. So I think of it as like your work self is interacting with someone in a certain way, but then you go home and then like your partner self kind of like comes out, or like if you're interacting with your kids, you're not going to have the same interaction or personality or like way of
Yeah.
speaking as you do at work. So it doesn't mean that you're experiencing some sort of psychotic break or severance,
Yeah.
but
Annie and Addie.
um yeah, yeah. It's not that you're experiencing some sort of like difference like that. It's just like the way that you operate. And so on the inside, those different voices kind of chime in at different times, you know? So like if my daughter comes up to me and is telling me about like some comment that a kid made at school about mental health, I'm like being the mom with her, but on the inside, the therapist self is like diagnosing maybe, or sometimes hard to turn that off. But anyways, okay. So that's how these parts coexist, right? So sometimes in the car, I will listen to like throwback worship music. Okay. For just like the straight nostalgia of it.
Gosh.
Okay. Yeah. It's something that happens, I think, for a lot of people that have deconstructed. It's like there's some components that you
Yeah.
miss. It's just
It
nostalgic.
is
So,
nostalgia.
anyways, if I go on Spotify and I type in like worship music, okay, nowadays if I hit play on that, I don't know any of those songs. I I don't know them. I mean, the evangelical world has moved on without me.
Yep.
If you don't go to church for a year, you don't know the songs that they're singing. And so I'll go in and be like 2010s worship and I'll listen to like older stuff. And so anyways, when I was in the car, I was thinking about that. I was like, dang, like I really feel if I were to go to church, like I wouldn't feel like I belonged. Like I don't know these songs. I'm just as a person that's like never gone. And so uh that that brought me to like the topic that we decided to talk about. I was like, I don't really have a testimony of like my faith breaking. It's more like being disillusioned with like the people, or disillusioned with like this idea that like leadership can control my decision making in my day-to-day life and stuff like that.
Okay.
So that's what I found freedom from, like not being involved in any of that anymore.
Oh.
So, yeah, I had this like internal dialogue happening of like, I feel so much freedom. I don't want to be connected anymore. Like, I don't care if I don't know the songs anymore. Like, I've been good outside of this whole community. And then there's this fundamentalist part of me, this like very religious part of me that I always know what the arguments are going to be. So that part was like, well, you had control of that. You shouldn't have left then. Had you stayed, you would still feel like you belonged. So like you did that to yourself, right? And so then I'm like, well, I had reason to do that because like remember everything that happened. And then that part comes back with like all these Bible verses of like, don't look at what's happening in front of you, but fix your eyes on what's eternal and stuff like that. And I'm just like, I am, It's like- yeah. So there's this like conversation that's going on. And I know you've talked before about like how these parts become polarized,
Mhm.
and I always describe it as a tug of
Yep.
war that's going on the inside. Yeah, it's like it's a debate on a consistent basis between the like freedom that I found like
Yeah.
actually, and the freedom that the religious part holds on to, because like to it, freedom comes with confession, and freedom comes with like being involved in a community, and so that it's like freedom from eternal
Yeah.
damnation. Whereas this other half of me is like, I don't believe in that as a concept anymore. Maybe there's been moments where like those scary doctrines have like ceased to make sense to me,
Mhm.
but in the larger context, I still um philosophize about like a lot of religious concepts. But anyways, any thoughts coming from you that like, you're familiar with how these dialogues and polarizations work and
Okay,
things?
wait, let me, like a therapist, get it straight, even though we just talked about how we're
Okay.
not therapists on this podcast, but this is your
Yeah.
content. Um,
Okay.
so are you saying that one part of you thinks it's best for you to not be in the religious spaces because you're free from the authority and the way that it was harming you, but the other voice that's you call the fundamentalist voice is, pretty sure that you've made a bad decision and that you should go back and is giving you Bible verses to be like, what would be best for Elisa as if she was back in those spaces? Because that's really good for her. Is that the
Yeah,
answer?
like that. Yes, that's 100% correct. I would also add that that religious part feels very authoritarian.
Ah,
Yeah. Like it's like this was the instruction and you didn't follow that, so you can make restitutions, And like you can just go back to how things were before all of this happened. You could go back, you could just learn the songs and fit in again and just like continue on with that and feel the security of eternity. So,
yeah.
but if you're resistant to that, that's your own fault.
What do you feel towards both of those parts that you have as you're telling it to me?
Um My gut answer to that is I'm like, why can't this religious one just like calm down?
Yeah.
And I know the answer to that because the fear that goes into a lot of these teachings and stuff makes it be on edge, and it kind of like makes it flip through all these rule books and stuff like that. Like you have to make sure that you're doing it right, and you have to make sure all your boxes are checked and stuff like
Yeah.
that. So yeah, when one part's just like, oh, I don't know these songs anymore, the other one's like, yeah, you think I'm aware. It's been years
Yeah.
since we felt like we were in a good space,
Yeah.
like salvation wise, But on the other hand, I'm like, I can't submit back to that authority. And then this one's like, you know, submit and get back in there, do all the things. You don't want to submit because you're stiff necked like the Israelites in
Yeah, they're
Exodus.
so bad and they're so
Yeah.
prideful. Okay, I feel like a ton of compassion for the fundamentalist one because since you're currently not doing what it wants, that's the one holding all the distress because it's like over there knowing all the verses and knowing what the quote right thing to do is and like holding all the scary stuff for you. While happy you is just like, oh, it's fine. We're out of church. And this one is sitting there. It feels like in a corner, like, oh my gosh, this is so serious. And then it's coming back louder in your head. Cause it's like,
Yes.
I got to make sure she knows how serious this is. And I'm so scared.
Yeah.
Am I exaggerating it?
Yeah. That's the experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do those coexist together?
That's hard.
That's the question. Yeah.
It's hard. My zoomed out lens is that, like, I have this sense that a lot of people who are raised in religion, especially like really fear driven ones where there was so many rules, if they leave, probably most of us have like a version of that part in our head that chimes in and tells us, like, hey, this is a terrible decision. You've broken
Yeah.
all the
Yeah.
religious rules.
Yep. So I think like functionally they coexist just by like having the tug of war happen
Yeah.
and just being like, yeah, I hear you, but like this is the decision I'm making, or it's
Mhm.
like when you're dealing with, I don't know if our listeners will understand, but like when you're dealing with like younger parts, that are like fearful and stuff like that, it's just kind of like, hey, I'm your adult now, like let the 34-year-old make the decisions, not the scared 7-year-old, you
Yeah.
know? Um, And yeah, so it's just kind of like, hey, uh, bring the 7-year-old over and it's just like, watch how I handle this. Watch how I address it as a stable adult,
Yeah,
and
totally.
we can move forward. Yeah. That's it. That's such a nutshell that takes like months of therapy, I think, to practice and be like, you know, get back behind me. You don't need to be making these decisions, but I want you to watch how that ends up happening, or, how things can be scary, but they end up being addressed by an adult and then it goes by smoothly.
I think that's
But
the trick that you do in therapy sometimes is that, like you just said, you don't like that voice that brings all the verses up because it's mean, but if you can have
yeah.
an internal paradigm shift and think of it like that voice is coming from a part that's more childlike and needs your comfort,
Mhm.
instead of abandoning it and shoving it away, then you turn towards it and you're like, "You're right, that is so scary that someone told one
Mhm.
time you were gonna be in big trouble for moving," and then you, like, feel that adult self in your body and sort of, like, show the part like, "I'm big now and I'm safe and, like, look at all like, I'm okay." But also, like, it's hard because I think most of us wanna shove that part away and not listen to it because it's so upset, and yet listening to it sometimes is, like, the way to make it better.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point.
I'm
Yeah.
always to hear
The
about your fundamentalist part that's scared.
the intervention that happened with that, if you notice a few minutes ago, I said that that part is authoritarian and it's saying all these things. I was seeing it as like this older man, with a rule book. But if you unzip that, like Scooby Doo style, if you unzip that character, sometimes there is someone else that's inside of that. And like, I think psychologically, I was kind of like doing that on my own. It's like that was actually a kid that was like using this microphone to voice its own fears, but in the form of a authoritarian figure that I'd be more likely to listen to than the child.
Oh,
Yeah. So sometimes like that's a straight up therapy intervention of like, if you really look at that character, you unzip them, what else might be lying underneath that? And yeah, it forges more self-compassion for sure. Or, there's this big concept in internal family systems of there being no bad parts. So to say, I want that part to shut up. I wish it weren't a thing. I wish it didn't exist. That's not really the best approach to it. It's more of like understanding who they are and then relating to them in a developmentally appropriate way. Like, hey, stand here and watch. Like, I'm the adult now,
yeah.
but I want you to see this. That's better than like, you can't tell me what to do, because like they're 7.
And that
So
yes.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's such
So
a paradigm shift because then if you see them shift from a scary adult man older than you into a little kid, then, like, you can bring comfort to that part as yourself, like, you're capable of, like if it was a seven-year-old, you wouldn't be scared of what they had to say, and you would see that, like, okay, they've been told something they don't understand fully, and, like, they just need a hug, basically. They just need you to hug them.
yeah. Big psychological
Ah,
breakthroughs.
that's so
So,
fun.
yep, that's that. That's the commute thoughts. That's what I
Yay!
think about driving in the car.
Just you and yourselves.
It's heavy. Yep,
Thank you for
indeed.
sharing, that's cool.
Yeah.